Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today I'm going to be making calendula vinegar. And yes, I know I have a lot of vinegar making videos out there already, but because I keep morphing the way that I make vinegar, and I always have a lot of new people coming in that have no idea I have all these videos out here, I think it's a good idea every time I try a new variety, well, not every time because I do it a lot, I'm always switching it up, but every now and then to do a video on making vinegar and how you can do it and all the different options that you have for making vinegar. Some people just think ACV, which is apple cider vinegar, but there's so many other types of vinegar you can make besides apple. And so I have various ways. I use the different vinegars, and I do have a video just on that I'll go ahead and link to right up here, that's about all the different ways I use my vinegars. And I also recently did a video answering some typical vinegar questions that you'll also want to watch if you're new to my channel and you haven't seen it yet and you haven't made vinegar yet. These are going to be common questions that you're going to have, and I recommend you also check that out, and I will also link to that right up there. Okay, so what I have here is I started putting the calendula flowers in my jar. So I've got a half-gallon mason jar right here. This is my favorite way to do it, is half-gallon at a time. You can do a whole gallon at a time. It's all dependent on how much you want to do. You could even just do a quart. So just keep in mind the measurements I'm using are based on 1/2 gallon. And the only measurement I'm really going to give you is the sugar. So I'm just going to throw all these flowers in here. I want a pretty strong calendula vinegar. Now I've made varieties of calendula vinegar before, but I have yet to do one with just the flowers. This one right here is calendula and rhubarb, and that's why it's got a stronger, more pink color to it. I don't think my calendula vinegar on its own is going to turn out quite that color. I think it will be sort of a nice peachy color when it gets done. And that's my guess. And if you watch down the road, probably a month from the time you see this video, I will likely be doing a this and that video, and within that I will show you what the calendula vinegar looks like, calendula only, when it's all done. Now you can see here I have pink, yellow, and orange calendula flowers in here, because that's all the different, and even in the yellow and in the orange I have a variety of shades in there. So in this jar, now however full you fill it is up to you. In fact, I'll probably, as soon as more calendula flowers have bloomed, will still pick more and throw them in here. You can fill it, as long as it stays somewhat loose, all the way to the top if you want. The more fruits or flowers you put in there, the stronger of that flavor or scent or whatever you're going to get. Like lavender vinegar makes a very strongly scented vinegar without even having to put a whole lot in there. You could just fill it halfway up with lavender flowers and you're going to have a very lavender smelling vinegar. Now I love the smell of lavender, but I also love the smell of calendula. To me, it's not a flowery smell, you know, not perfumey like the way lavender is, but to me it's a very clean smell, and I love it. And by the way, I do have a video also on the benefits of calendula that I recommend if you're interested in making calendula vinegar. Maybe why would you want to make calendula vinegar? Well, go ahead and check that video out right up there. It's just about the different health benefits, and I believe I talk about some of the different things you can do with calendula. So to my half-gallon jar, since calendula is going to have little to no sugar in it of its own, I want to use a 1/2 cup of sugar in this. And yes, you must have sugar in your vinegar to make it. Stevia is not going to work. You can put stevia in there, but you need to have an actual sugar, not just a sweetener, a sugar in there. It can be honey, it can be coconut sugar. I always use organic evaporated cane juice in mine. So I'm putting a 1/2 cup, one of these lids is approximately a 1/4 cup of sugar into this. And I'm going to do it all from the start. It's very unlikely I'll add any sugar to this along the process. Now my last vinegar making video I did, I was talking about adding sugar, which sometimes I do. It just depends when I check it, how it's coming along. If I feel like it needs a little more strength, that needs to be fermenting for a longer period of time, I will go ahead and add some sugar to it once the bubbling starts to slow down. And then what will happen is the bubbling the next day should pick up pretty fast again. And that's just going to raise the acidity of your vinegar if you do that. But typically a half cup per half gallon amount at a time is going to give you enough. Now if you're using fruit, I say a quarter cup to a third cup, depending on how sweet the fruit is and how much fruit you're using in here. Like if you're using whole apples and, you know, not just the apple peels and cores, you might not need to add any sugar. If you're using a good sweet apple, like a red apple or whatever apple you have that's super sweet already, you may not need to add any, as long as you're using the whole apple and it's a sweet apple. But if it's a tart apple and or you're using just the cores and the peels to make your vinegar, which is a great way to do it, I've done that many times, you're going to want to add at least a quarter cup of sugar to that, maybe up to a third. And then check it along the way, and then possibly add some more sugar to it if you would like. All right, now that I've got the sugar in there, I'm going to go ahead and just pour some filtered rainwater right over the top. Now, one of the other common questions I get that I didn't think to answer in that one video is, do I have to use rainwater? No, you can use a good filtered well water or spring water. I just recommend don't go with, or even distilled water. I just recommend don't use city tap water, because all city tap water has chlorine in it, and a lot of most cities still are putting fluoride in their water like our city does. That's why we don't use, even though we're hooked up to city water, we also have a rainwater collection, not just to save money, but also so that we can avoid having the fluoride, because fluoride is very difficult. It takes a lot more to filter it out, and then you've got the chlorine. But if you have to rely on city water, and you don't have any other option, then you can simply off-gas it for a day or so by putting your water into a jar like this and then covering it with a cloth so that the chlorine can evaporate out. Because you really don't want the chlorine in there, because it's going to slow down the fermenting process when you're making your vinegar or your wine or whatever. You do not want chlorine in there or anything that you're going to ferment. So anyway, as you can see, I just use a chopstick. I'm stirring that sugar up. Don't worry too much if it doesn't fully dissolve right away, because it will over time. And the yeast is going to be feeding off the sugar. That's why you have to have sugar, because you can't have vinegar without it. You must have sugar. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more water, because you'll find once you stir your herbs and fruit and stuff in there, that the water is going to be filling in, just like with canning, it's going to be filling in all those spaces in there where there were air pockets, and then you'll just need to add a little more liquid to top that off. The next step is simply to take a clean piece of cloth. I have several little pieces of cloth, you know, any extras. It's either flannel, I always use cotton. It doesn't have to be flannel, but I always use a cotton fabric. And I'll put that over the top of my jar. You want this to stay aerated. It needs to get oxygen to it for it to become vinegar. And then I just take a rubber band and put it over the top. That is to keep out the cloth is to keep bugs and dust out, and obviously the rubber band to hold it in place, because your fruit flies, they love vinegar. Once it starts brewing, they're going to be all over it, so you want to keep the fruit flies out of it. And then what I'm going to do is daily, for at least the first 2 weeks, I'll be taking this off. I'll take my chopstick or wooden spoon and and then I'll stir it up, because once this starts bubbling, it's going to be pushing, all these flowers are going to be pushing up to the top and out of the liquid, and then you're going to develop mold, which won't hurt you. You could just leave it for 30 days and forget about it, and then just lift the top layer off. You can get weights and put them on, but I talk more about that in that other video, and why I've gone to doing the stir method. And this is one of the reasons why, is now I don't have to worry about mold. This also keeps it aerated, doing it every day, and I just get a much better vinegar by doing that for at least 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be longer than 2 weeks, but typically the first 2 weeks Stir it at least once a day. Once a day is sufficient, but you can do twice a day. And then in about anywhere, depending on how much sugar you use, anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, you should have a nice strong vinegar. Okay, now right here what I have is a lavender lemon vinegar. So I used some lavender from my garden and then just threw in some lemon slices, and then I made my vinegar, and I just recently strained all this out. It is completely done. And what I want to show you is that since I've been using this method of stirring it daily and adding more sugar, I am yielding a much stronger vinegar than I used to by simply just putting the fruit and sugar in there and then just letting it sit for 30 days and only using 1/4 cup of sugar. And I also want to show you my last vinegar making video. I was using a different pH strip. This is a much better one because it gives you more reading, so you can get a more accurate reading on this. Now, it's still not going to be the most accurate way to check the acidity of your vinegar, but it should give you a pretty good idea. The other option is to buy a specific electronic type of pH meter. Those can be expensive, and even those are not fully accurate. So it just depends on how important it is for you to know exactly how acidic your vinegar is. But I know that this has got to be pretty close because I've used my vinegar since making it this way for making cheese, where my old vinegar, the old way, did not work well for making cheese. It didn't curdle the milk enough. And I've also used it for making refrigerator pickles. So what I do, and I will link to these particular strips below, is just to make them last a little bit longer, and when I don't test my vinegar every single time, just every now and then when I'm not sure if it's as acidic as I want, is you can actually cut these in half. Making sure your scissors are dry before you do that, and don't touch the end if your fingers are wet. Then take that little strip, swish it around in there just for a few seconds, and then right away you want to hold that up to your thing right here, and that'll tell you just how acidic your vinegar is. So you can see where you want your vinegar is about a 4.5. That's a 4.5 pH reading is 5% acidity. Okay, there's a difference in the numbers. So 4.5 is what you want. And you can see by looking at this, I'm probably right at about a 3.5. Okay, so that tells me I have my vinegar as strong as I need it to be to do whatever it is I want to use it for, whether it be cleaning or pickling or whatever. Alright, well there you have it. It's as easy as that, making vinegar. Be creative. You can check out my playlist on vinegar and see all the different ways that I've made it, different varieties from fruits to herbs to flowers, even using pieces of my cedar tree and juniper to make a good cleaning vinegar. And it has many uses, so don't forget to check out those videos I have linked up here. And I'll also go ahead and put the vinegar playlist at the end of this video in the end card so you can see that, and be watching down the road for an update on how this vinegar turned out as far as the flavor, the looks, and how I decide I'm going to use it, because I don't know yet. It's either going to be for washing my hair, for cleaning, or maybe just a little bit of everything. Okay, well I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new, and that you'll give vinegar making a try if you haven't started already. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.